But thank you first and foremost for being with us. Again, if this is your first day or you've been here since day one, doesn't matter. We love you all the same. Although, to be fair, if you've been here since day one, it's like your first child. You love your first child. You love them a little bit. Right? Come on in. Thumbs up. Subscribe. I'm going to turn money into more money. How can I do that? On DraftKings. What? I'm going to turn more money into even more money. How am I going to do that? With the NBA Bet Pro tool. All right. All of that aside, let's begin and start the clock. The first play for us is over. Now we're over 49.5 here. This is a key number at 51. So getting over anything below in that realm, of course, I mean, it's 42, and who cares about 51? 41. But in this
over Maryland.
51, that's all we're talking about. Close to that, 1.5.
Both of the games. Ohio State was up like 38-7 against Northwestern. It was confusing. Some weird games out there. But, okay, here we go. All right, everybody. As many of you have heard, basically no matter where you go, Happy New Year. It is 2023. We're ready to turn the page. Nice, beautiful Monday, January 2nd in the sports world. A lot of you are off. Hopefully, you've chosen to spend your time. A little college football DFS picks today, live before lock. We've got 4 fantastic bowl games to get things started today. I am Ben Rasa. I am joined, of course, by Matt Gajewski, here to break down these games. The playoffs are in the books. We saw... I assume you watched those games, and what wild games they were.
Yeah, I think it might have been the best college football playoff we've ever had.
Yes.
Just in terms of parity, competitive games in the first round, which a lot of times we don't see. And we saw teams that don't normally win actually come out and play well. TCU being the one that fits that bill specifically. But I mean, a lot of people complain about, the same 5 teams make it in the playoffs year in, year out. So seeing TCU get through was awesome. And I mean, me in particular, loving TCU specifically, it was a great day to see them actually get the job done.
It was awesome. Just a cool team that, Cincinnati last year, a lot of people, rightfully so, said that, they didn't belong. They couldn't compete. And I heard some of that with TCU, and obviously they proved they can do more than compete. They could win the whole thing potentially. The second game was, to me, the better game. It did not go my way. I wanted Ohio State to win. I thought they were going to win. Gave it everything and then some, but Georgia just can't be killed. We're going to talk about the national championship as it gets closer, no doubt about it. But we still got 4 bowl games today. Some good ones for DFS purposes. We're going to tell you who to play, what to do. We're going to talk about our friends at No House Advantage. I did a video on them this morning, but I am ready to dive in unless you have any more thoughts on TCU or anything else that we missed in previous days.
I'm ready to go.
Okay, beautiful. Sorry. One thing. Alabama, it was 10-0, and I was thinking, man, they don't look like they want to be here. They wanted to be there just fine. They kind of showed maybe they had something to say about who's the best team out there, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get into these games. We start with Mississippi State and Illinois, certainly contrasting styles. A 46-point total, a 3-point favorite for Mississippi State. Obviously, the just god-awful tragedy with Mike Leach. That's impossible to really talk about. They're playing the game. Mississippi State is the favorite. Let's talk about them. We know what they want to do. They want to throw the ball early, often, quick passes, 1 million passes a game. When you look at an offense like this, does it seem as simple as it seems on paper, which is this is DFS gold, given how much we could see in terms of play volume?
I think to a degree, yes, but you run into a couple problems. First one, okay, Mike Leach is gone. How does that affect the offense? You still have most of the players intact. The second problem here is this is by far the lowest total on the board, and it continues to take money to the under. So 45.5 points. Illinois' defense is great. They'll have 2 of their corners opting out of the game. Vegas doesn't really seem to think that matters too much. So how much success do they have against an Illinois team that's defensively sound, slow, and now you have the premier play caller out of the game. So I think all that kind of works against Mississippi State here. And then lastly, they've been a hard team to stack all season long because they just rotate 7 guys whimsically on and off the field at receiver. So you've got Will Rogers. I mean, he makes some sense to a little bit here. I mean, negative 172 rush yards. You're starting in a significant hole with him, especially when you're going up against an elite defense. So you kind of need a 300-yard game from Will Rogers. He has 7 of them this year. It's about 60% of the time he's hitting it. If he doesn't, at 7K, he's just going to completely tank your lineups. So I think there's actually a lot working against Mississippi State here, but because of how many plays they run, which you mentioned, I think maybe you could look at a one-off among a skill position player. But Will Rogers, I think, should be left to the larger tournaments.
Is it still, we're of course going to get into each team and personnel, but I always, early in the shows, like to ask you some of the more, not even philosophical, but macro level questions. Another 4-game slate. We talked about one of these just the other day. Is it another double quarterback, or do you say that, this is one, there's not a lot at QB, and maybe we're only going to have one quarterback on some of our lineups?
I think there's 2 elite quarterbacks, 3 or 4 pretty good ones. So for me, I'm mostly running 2 quarterbacks. I have a handful of lineups that don't have it, but it's literally like 2 or 3.
Okay.
For the most part, if you're building one or a couple, you want 2 quarterbacks.
And when you talk about those tiers, where obviously Will Rogers is not in the elite tier. What tier is he in? The pretty good or even below that?
I think he's in the pretty good tier. He's in the tier that I'll play a little bit of in tournaments. I essentially think there's 5 playable quarterbacks today, and he enters the bottom part of that tier.
You know that if you do play him, you're not getting there with rushing. So how many pass catchers are you looking to put with him, or just in general for Mississippi State? You mentioned they've got a half dozen guys out there that could catch some balls. Is there 1 or 2 that's a priority, or is it truly a roulette wheel?
It is a bit of a roulette wheel, unfortunately. And I have him stacked double in the lineups I have with him with at least 2 players. That does include Jaquavius Marks, the running back. Dylan Johnson transferred. JJ Jernigan transferred. So it looks like it's going to be Marks as the lead back with Simeon Price as the change of pace. And Simeon Price hasn't even touched the ball in 3 straight weeks. But we saw Dylan Johnson miss some time earlier this year, and they didn't just go to a 2-way committee. They didn't keep that. They decided to use a feature back. And Marks has an elite potential in the pass game if that is the case. You look at the Mississippi State backs combined, they have a 20% target share in the year. They both hover around 10% because of the split. But even if that climbs up to 15%, 16% for Jaquavius Marks, I don't really care what he does on the ground. Like last game, I should say, Dylan Johnson had 9 targets. If Marks gets 9 targets in the pass game, there's a chance he's just the best running back play on the slate. He's going unowned because I think maybe people are projecting a timeshare, and this is also a really bad game environment. So maybe just touchdown expectations low for him. But I think Marks is an excellent GPP play. And among the receivers, I'll just kind of break this down best I can because it literally is the whims of the coaching staff. You have Rara Thomas, who is their best receiver. He's transferring. And you also lost Christian Ford, who is more of a depth receiver. But even Rara Thomas, if you look at his route rate on the year, there's games where he's at 40%, 70%, 65, 35. Like this is all over the place for these teams. And that's how it's been with everybody. So as it stands now, here's how I would rank them. But you just have to know going into this, it's going to be really volatile. Number 1 would be Rufus Harvey. Barely. Number 2 would be Caleb Ducking. They're kind of in a tier by themselves, 1A, 1B, sort of interchangeable. Number 3 is Lydetra Griffin. I think he's kind of by himself, but maybe you could put Austin Williams into that tier. Their route rates were both shy of 50% on the season. But again, you see them bouncing around 35, 45, 65, 55% of the routes, no consistency. And then the last tier would be Jalen Wally, Justin Robinson. And then I don't know if Jamar Calvin's playing. He's entering the draft, but he didn't specifically say he was playing in this game or not. So he would be in that tier if you could see him warming up, but I don't know that okay, news literally just came through. I got the notification. Jamar Calvin's out.
Okay.
So the last tier would be Robinson and Wally.
Anything else, or can we move to the Illini?
we can move on unless you want anything specific there, but just very, very volatile. I would probably limit this to 2 Mississippi State players.
Yeah, it's a volatile situation. On the other side, so Illinois is rarely in great shootout games, but they always have some relevance because Chase Brown touched the ball 40 times a game. Now there's a big, big opportunity to fill that void. Let's start in the backfield. What is left there without him? Is there someone that's going to step up and see that type of production, or are there 3 or 4 guys that are going to be worked in here?
They're getting back Justin McCray, and the coaching staff was very vocal about this being a timeshare. And I think that makes sense when you just look at the players. So neither of them have played much this year. That makes sense with Chase Brown being a monster. But Reggie Love is about 190 pounds, 195 pounds. And Josh McCray is 240. So these players are polar opposites in terms of their builds. Interestingly, McCray has more targets than Reggie Love this year, even though he's played only a handful of games. But the coaching staff has been very vocal about this being a timeshare. So I think we're looking probably at some sort of split. 50-50 is the guess right now for us in the back end of the projections, but it is just that. It is a guess. So between the two, Josh McCray at 3,200 is going to look a lot more attractive than Reggie Love at 52, just to give you everybody you want in your lineups around him. That is if you play McCray. But again, 50-50 split is my anticipation.
Looking at Illinois outside that, talk to me about, a QB situation of, unless I'm missing something, they wouldn't be in the elite tier. Is there any interest that you play an Illinois quarterback, and then just talk about the passing game as a whole?
I do not want to play any quarterback for Illinois. This is going to be Tommy DeVito's last game, thankfully. He applied for a medical waiver, and the NCAA did the right thing and said, we don't need to see any more Tommy DeVito. So he's not playing, thankfully. Pass game, they throw a fair amount. I mean, it's mostly condensed to Isaiah Williams, 7.7 targets per game. He just gets targeted right around the line of scrimmage and falls down. So they're not dynamic targets at all, but the volume is enough for me to maybe throw some flyers on Williams. He's in my player pool at the very least, I'll say that. Outside of him, Pat Bryant initially was the wide receiver too. He got banged up through the year. So now they just devolved into a rotation of Brian Hightower, Pat Bryant, and Casey Washington. And it's about as easy to break down as any situation. Each of them had exactly 55% of the routes in the last game. No differentiator at all. I think Bryant's the most talented of the three if you want to throw a dart, but I don't have any of the ancillary Illinois pass catchers.
We had a question from chat. Who's the better play? Williams, the wide receiver from Illinois, or Love in the backfield?
I think Williams, personally. We don't know what the split is with Love, but we know Williams is the target leader. And I don't anticipate either of them being owned. So it's not like you're getting leverage between one of the two. They're both going to be leverage plays.
Anything else? As you mentioned, this is the lowest totaled game out there. Their player props on No House Advantage are reflective in that. It's just not one that is expected to have serious alphas. And even price-wise, when I look at this game as a whole, you don't have, 8K, 9K guy. Like the most expensive option outside of Rodgers is Williams on the outside.
The only thing I'll say is for the shootout potential, 2 of the best Illinois defenders did opt out of the game. So how impactful are they? Bookmakers clearly think not that impactful, but maybe you believe a little more. And we know that Mississippi State doesn't have a good defense. Specifically, they can't defend the run. So if it appears that bookmakers do value Chase Brown, but if perhaps they can get similar production or 75% out of McCray and Love, that this maybe goes over the total. But that's the bull case for this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some unknowns there, and they're going to have their chances, but I'm still a little skeptical of what we get from the backfield. Let's move on to the best total game. Tulane, your boys against USC. Slight favorite for the Trojans, 66-point total. We'll start with Tulane. They're excited to be here. Obviously, one of the best years in school history. Spears in that backfield has been fantastic. Pratt under center has been fantastic. Let's start with the quarterback, as we always do. Where is Pratt falling? I'm going to keep asking you this question. Is he one of those elites? Is he in that pretty good tier, maybe just ahead of Rodgers, or is he somewhere else?
I think Pratt is number 3 for me on this slate. I like Pratt quite a bit. This game is awesome. The total's rising. It's up 2 points since yesterday, 65.5. With Pratt, the only issue is they prefer, I don't want to say prefer, at times they'll use him as a game manager. So he's very mobile, 395 rushing yards this year. He also missed a game, but he only averages 230.5 as a passer, and that's on 26.8 pass attempts. So that clearly reflects that this Tulane team is comfortable playing slow, playing run heavy, and at times that means taking the ball out of Pratt's hands. However, you do have a potential shootout in this game. We know USC plays horrific defense, and Pratt's been efficient. So even when the attempts are low, at times he still reaches the ceiling because he's such a good quarterback play. So I think overall he will be number 3 for me and very much in consideration. I think an outside consideration in cash for me as well.
Who's he going to be throwing the ball to? Certainly, you got Wyatt and Watts. Pair them up. One of them. I mean, how do you anticipate your Tulane stacks looking?
They're actually a little bit better than they were previously this year. Not only have they committed to Watts and Wyatt, but Day-Day McDougal transferred out of the program, so that naturally condenses things a little bit here. And both Wyatt and Watts were full-time players last week. Wyatt has seen his route rate north of 85% in 3 straight games. So you see the 3.8 targets per game for him this year. It's increased substantially of late, over 5 targets per game, yardage much better as well. And Deuce Watts, he also saw 75% of the routes in the last game, which was a big jump for him. So I think he's also somebody you could look to. I prefer Wyatt on both FanDuel and DraftKings, just a slight price difference in both. I think he's worth the jump on DraftKings. And then the wide receiver 3, I think, is mostly going to be Jaquan Jackson. You saw Lawrence Keys, not entirely benched, but his route rate did drop in the AAC title game, putting Jaquan Jackson on the field more. They'll use Jackson a lot as like a kick returner too, more of a gadgety player, but he's run laps around Keys efficiency-wise. So this was a change that needed to be made. I think he's a bit overpriced compared to some of the other value on the slate, like in LSU and Utah, but he's somebody you could use as a dart. And last guy to mention is Tyreek James, sort of the same price range as Jaquan Jackson. I think Jackson's more involved straight up, and James saw a 9% route rate in the last game. Didn't see an injury tag on him, so I'm not sure why that was. Again, you're not getting the best beat reporting out of Tulane, so could have been an injury. That was a big surprise. He's been at pretty consistent 60+% of the routes. So I think he'll jump back to that. Not too worried, but if you are worried at all, I would just play Jackson straight up over him. But I think all 4 could be used today.
Yeah, certainly there's not a huge discrepancy. I'm in the player prop world at No House Advantage, and I'm looking Wyatt, 52.5 receiving yards, Watts, 43.5. So kind of in that order that you kind of preferred to begin with. You've got Pratt, 239.5 passing yards, and he's got some mobility. But the one guy we haven't talked about yet is Spears in the backfield. And this guy is projected for serious work and serious output. A walking 100-yard bonus. He's cleared that in 7 straight games. He's coming off a 22-carry, 199-yard performance against UCF. He scores a bunch. He's not a 0 in the passing game. 6,900. Where does he fall in the running back rankings today?
Yeah, honestly, Ben, there's not much to add. I think he's the best running back play on the slate. You broke down beautifully exactly why. He's likely to touch the ball 20 times. If this game is competitive, which it's projected to be, it's inside a field goal in terms of the spread. He is just a monster ceiling. This is a team that will contract and use Spears even more in competitive games. Last 2 contests, we saw Spears with touch counts of 36 and 25. They don't use Shady Clayton or Iverson Celestine unless games are out of hand. They each combine for 1 carry over the last 2 games.
He's got the backfield to himself, particularly in these close contests. All hands on deck today. This is not related to him today. I believe that he's eligible for the draft.
He's eligible. Hasn't said one way or the other, though.
Hasn't said one way or the other. I wonder if he goes.
I think he still has more eligibility left, too. So, I don't know. Pratt already said he's running it back. I don't know how highly Spears would be drafted. This is an excellent running back class. So maybe he's coming back, to a G5 program. He could maybe benefit himself. So who knows? Maybe he's back. Maybe he's not.
Speaking of G5 programs, Grayson McCall, he says, I don't need to leave. I'm back.
Oh, buddy. go on to, I'm going to go. I don't care who they play. I'm going to go to their first home game. You should come. Let's go.
Coastal Carolina, why not? Beautiful things. Likelihood that Spears and Pratt both hit the ceiling. Is there merit to consolidating most of, if not all of the Tulane production and having those guys together in lineups? Or is that kind of not the correlation we're looking for today?
I think you can. You've got a total in this game of 65 points. The next highest total is 54. So pretty big gap there and risk all around you. I have no issue playing them together.
On the other side of this game is USC, a team that certainly had bigger aspirations than this. They were unable to get past Utah. Caleb Williams, he's got the hardware in his closet. Fantastic year. I didn't think that he was going to play, and it looks like he is, but how do we evaluate a situation where there are whispers they might be more conservative? There are whispers that maybe his running upside is a little mitigated in this spot. And even looking at the props, 29.5 is his rushing yards prop. What do you do with Caleb Williams today? I assume he's one of the top two that are ahead of Pratt in your rankings still.
Yeah. And I just don't know why you would play him if he's injured. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm operating under the assumption that he's full go. Like, this game is meaningless. I don't think it's going to be like the Pac-12 title game where he's out there standing on one leg. Like, the slightest tweak, I would think he exits this game. And if that's a risk, I don't know why you'd play him to begin with. So maybe this is a game planning thing where they think they're going to embrace the run more. That might happen. But I tend to think he's going to be closer to a full go, which puts him easily in the top 4 for me. Actually, in the top 2. I think he's honestly the QB1.
It's hard to argue with that. I mean, I respect Tulane's defense, but they don't see Caleb Williams week in and week out. Few teams do, and no one really can stop him anyway. So if his rushing, I kind of want to dig in a little here. Maybe he's a little more limited on the ground. Does that give you even more incentive if you're going to pay that price to him to pay up for a couple of his receivers? And what's left in that room? Obviously, you've got a guy in Mario Williams in Washington. Are these the guys that you're looking at, or is there more to break down on the outside?
Those are the guys I'm looking at specifically. There's not a lot of salary restrictions today, so you can get up to them. You just can't play like them all together. So you're probably deciding between 2 of the 3 stud receivers, but getting all of them is difficult. With that said, no Jordan Addison. He vacates 79 targets, 875 yards, a very clear route share. And we already had Taj Washington and Mario Williams in the Pac-12 title game, full routes. So I think it's very clear they're the top 2. I want to play at least one in most of my lineups, especially considering I have a ton of Caleb Williams. And I think the big question is, where does it go from there? Because this team runs 4 wide most of the time. They don't really use a tight end. So in the Pac-12 title game, you had Addison, Taj, and Mario all on the field almost every single snap. That left Brendan Rice and Kyle Ford almost 50-50 split to work. You had a 56% route share for Ford, 46% for Rice. With Addison gone now, I would anticipate both of these players climbing 60-70% of the routes, making them really good price adjusted plays. And previously, when we had Addison injured and Mario was injured for a period of time as well, players like Terrell Bynum and Michael Jackson also got on the field. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Bynum out there 30% of the route, something like that, maybe even a little more. There was a 3-game stretch where Williams and Addison missed, where Bynum had 3 straight games of 60% of the routes. I mean, Bynum is a former 4-star recruit, Washington transfer. I think this is more of a bet on him in the future being able to beat out some of these guys, the transfer to USC at least. But we're talking about a talented player here who's the stone minimum and could see an increased opportunity. So I think all of these receivers are in play. For me, I am prioritizing Washington and Mario, but if you end up with a different stud and you need to go down to Ford and Rice and Bynum, I don't see that it's being a huge concession.
If you had to pick, are we in a coin flip between Rice and Ford, or do you think one of them is more likely to really get a bump in production here?
I think it's Ford because he's been playing more recently. So they actually used Bynum as a starter at the beginning of the year, like weeks 1 through 4, something like that. The 3 wide receiver set they used primarily was Addison, Williams, and Brendan Rice. They did not use Taj Washington much in the beginning of the year. And Taj really emerged when Addison and Williams got injured. And since then, Brennan Rice has been on the decline. Ford has played more. So I'll break that tie by going Ford, but I do believe it's very close.
This is more of me just wondering who's Lake McCree?
He's a tight end.
Okay, that's kind of a cool name. Sorry, I know they don't really use that personnel.
Lake McCree.
Kyron Hudson. There's so many guys on these teams, but you mentioned there are multiple pass catchers that could easily get there. And if you're playing Caleb Williams, if he's limited mobility wise and he taps into that ceiling, it's very conceivable that not just one, but multiple USC pass catchers get there in this spot. How many guys from this game for you guys? I think this is a game you could easily load up on, but I would assume a lot of people are going to do just that.
I think so too, but I think you might be surprised how many people are smashing the button on LSU today.
Interesting. Got that game. Purdue, we'll get there in a second. We're going to talk about no house advantage in just a few minutes as well, but Purdue's got issues. Let's tidy this one up. Let's talk about the backfield. Dye goes down, but you had mentioned to me a lot over on the Odd Chopper YouTube, and I'm betting you, which you can always check us out on. They've got multiple guys who could step up and have stepped up in that backfield. What does it look like now? Is it a timeshare still, or is there one guy that's going to lead this backfield?
I think it's still going to be Austin Jones. We now have a 3-game sample of him really just dominating work. At least 19 touches in all those contests, solid pass game role. In the last game, people might be alarmed by the 15 carries and the 4 targets that Jones saw. But you look behind him, no carries for Riley Brown, no carries for Darwin Barlow. No other running back even touched the ball. They're just full out committed to Austin Jones here. So I think he is very much one of the top running back plays on the board. I think you're looking at a tier of 2 plays in Spears and Jones, and then there's a drop off from there. So those are very clearly the 2 running backs I'm trying to get to most in my builds.
And given that he obviously can catch the ball, I assume you're not overly concerned at who the quarterback is on a Jones team, even if it's Caleb Williams.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else in this game?
I don't think so. I think we hit it pretty well.
Yeah, we talked about Lake McCree. We got you covered.
Lake McCree.
We're all good. All right, 2 down, 2 to go. But as I said at the beginning, No House Advantage, they've been with us the whole year. They're sponsoring this show. I've been referencing their player props throughout. If you're saying, what is that? NoHouseAdvantage.com. It's a little different than the format that we're talking about here. But one, a lot of people are playing. People are really seeing that these player props type sites are popping up. There's a lot of money out there, and No House Advantage has it for every single sport. What you're doing, you're going over there and you're evaluating player props over or under on passing yards, receiving yards, catches, rushes, things like that. And you string them together and you build out your card. If you hit 3 in a row, 5x, 4-0, 11x, all different types of options. You can play versus the house. You can play individual. Certainly in big time tournaments, there's overlay. And to get started, go to the link in the description of this video. What does that mean? Right below the video, you're going to see all those links, all the bonuses, all the promos. You're going to get up to $100 first match deposit bonus over on NHA when you use that promo code Stokastic. It's that simple. You go there, you sign up, you put in that code, and boom, some extra money in the account. My man Mike's got it on the screen right now. You see you've got the games there and all different options. Just a really fun format, and one that's certainly, in my opinion, unsolved. And what I mean by that, our tools that we have on the site cater to this specific format. You're not going to sign up and say, okay, this is great. I got my money and I have no idea what I'm doing. We've got you covered. We've got you covered here at Stokastic. The tools will do the work for you. You can build the bankroll and really, really see that it's a site worth exploring. So shout out to No House Advantage. Definitely go over there and take advantage of that promo code. Now, you mentioned LSU. A lot of people might be going there, and I get it. They're a huge favorite against Purdue in this game, a 54-point total. They're a pair of touchdowns north of where they've got the Boilermakers. So let's start with LSU, and let's start with Mr. Daniels. Jaden Daniels, obviously a premier quarterback. You've got him up there with Caleb Williams today. Talk to me about what he can do and what Purdue's defense could do, if anything, in order to try to stop him.
Yeah, team's leading rusher. Amazing role on the ground. You're not really worried about injuries here. He's been practicing in full, so any injury you were worried about left over from the SEC title game. Doesn't look like that's going to affect him here. And he's been pretty efficient as a passer. This team quietly has a pass rate north of 50%. So Daniels very much involved there, 213 yards per game on just 29 attempts. Again, some of that depressed due to injury in games. So he immediately projects as one of the best value quarterbacks on the slate behind that massive team total. Again, it's 35 points. So he very much is an excellent quarterback play. And he's also not going to be limited in that you're worried about an opt-out, returning to the team next year. So everything lines up for Daniels here. I think he's one of the best quarterback plays on the board, right up there with Caleb.
Any interest in large field tournaments in running him naked?
Yeah, actually a lot of that today. And
Okay.
it's, I think, a leverage spot. The problem with LSU is you had so many opt-outs at receiver that we have these players that are going to play 75, 85% of the snaps and routes, and they're so cheap. So to break that down briefly and then talk why I think Daniels is contrarian as a naked option, you're not going to see Boutte in this game. He decided to return to the team, changed his mind. Now he's opted out, going to the NFL. Dre Jenkins opted out of this game, going to the NFL. Jack Beck hit the transfer portal. So that leaves only Malik Neighbors as a locked-in starter, 6.8 targets per game, 66 yards. He's priced efficiently. But now you have the projected wide receiver 2 is Brian Thomas at 4K and Kyron Lacey at 3.6K. Given the fact that they don't have any other receiver on the team with more than 10 targets, it looks like these guys are going to be full-time players. So if you get Kyron Lacey at 3.6K at a 90% route share, he's going to pop in projections. Same thing with Brian Thomas. So naturally, if you're using an optimizer, you're running it at Jaden Daniels stacks. I think if you're building on your own and then you're jamming all the studs, say you start your lineup with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Tajay Spears, Austin Jones, suddenly you run out of salary and the names you're just naturally clicking on are Thomas and Lacey. So one way to navigate that, I think, is to play Jaden Daniels naked because his cheap receivers are going to be really owned today.
It makes a lot of sense. Again, this is a 4-game slate, and you laid that out. That's kind of what I was alluding to when I asked that there's just a weird way that you can box out a lot, and we know that Daniels can get there on his own. I certainly, Neighbors is going to be busy over on No House Advantage. I like the over quite a bit on his prop. We had a question from Drew, member here at Stokastic. Who do you prefer as an ancillary option, Kyle Ford or Brian Thomas?
Brian Thomas.
It is a very good game. Do you have any worry? I mean, this is always a loaded question that they could try to get someone else some snaps at QB for LSU in the sense that, it's a big time spread. It's a bowl game. Or do you think that if that happens, that means Daniels may have already done serious damage?
I don't think we do. I mean, you're running into a weird situation where they committed to Daniels for next year. So what the hell are they going to do with Garrett Nussmeier?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this game doesn't matter, but I really hate when people start saying that because for almost 112 teams in the country, you could say every single game doesn't matter. I mean, the teams that aren't winning the title, you could argue every single game they play doesn't matter. So what makes this different than any other regular season game LSU plays? It's Brian Kelly's first year, chance to win a bowl game. I think we see Daniels play the whole time.
Any interest in an LSU tight end potentially? Guy like Taylor?
Actually, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I just forgot about this, Ben. Mason Taylor at 3,800 plays almost every single snap. He's not dynamic, but he's out there almost every single play. And I think he's going to be significantly less owned than Brian Thomas and Kyron Lacey. Only 25 yards per game, but even without the opt-outs, like he was on the field almost every play. He's a great contrarian option. So thanks for bringing that up. I just forgot.
No, absolutely. I mean, some of these teams, you mentioned the personnel, there's going to be some openings, and LSU's a team that hasn't shied away. Or it's not like USC where they're not utilizing that position. Let's talk about the backfield. We'll take some questions from chat. Then, of course, we'll keep it rolling. What do we see? Again, they're big-time favorites. What do we see for the LSU backfield? You already alluded that Daniels, in some regards, is their best rushing option, but who else could get the ball on the ground?
They have a three-way committee, which is really problematic here. Josh Williams was the lead back towards the end of the season. They sort of committed to him. He had a game with 19 touches, and he got hurt. He hasn't played in the last 2 games, but he was questionable for both, which indicates to me another month off. You're probably back to full strength, so I'm fully anticipating seeing him here. which likely renders the two-way committee between John Emery and Noah Cain a three-way committee, which is kind of disastrous on a slate where you have Jones and Spears and a number of running back plays we already want to get to. And we also don't know who's going to lead this because Williams led this on the year, led it towards the end of the season before the injury. From there, John Emery has more touches than Noah Cain, but Noah Cain's out-touched John Emery in each of the last 3 games himself. So they'll run the hot hand a lot here. You're kind of playing with fire now that this is expanded to 3 running backs rather than 2.
Very difficult situation. Again, they are a large favorite, and I get it, but with the mobile quarterback and some of the other things we've already talked about, it feels like the more prudent decision is to try to get exposure with LSU through Daniels and maybe an extension of some of his pass catchers rather than going to that backfield. Let's talk about the other side of this game with Purdue. I guess the first question I just want to ask you, what is the status of this team? It seems like they've got major issues personnel-wise, coaching-wise. What's going on with Purdue? They're a large underdog here.
Yeah, you hinted at it, lost their head coach, and they have more opt-outs than any other team. Will include opt-outs, transfers, and injuries. They have more of those absences than any other team that played a bowl game this year. 5 or 6 starters on both sides of the ball, hence why they're massive underdogs here. To start, they're losing their quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, going to the draft, moving forward with Austin Burton. Essentially no sample size on him, maybe a little mobile. He has 42 rushing yards, but complete dice roll in terms of talent. We have no idea, just haven't seen him. So I don't have him included in my 5 preferred quarterbacks, but of the players you might throw a dart on, I think he's the one you're probably looking at the most just because have no idea what he does. And then in the backfield, Devin Maccabee, I mean, he didn't get a scholarship till midway through this year. That's how injured they've been. He should be the lead back here, but I have some reservations. Dylan Downing did return towards the end of the year. How much does he play? King Doru hasn't played in multiple weeks. His status wasn't updated, which I think he doesn't play here, but I'd watch during warmups just to make sure. Kobe Lewis transferred. So it's still pretty clearly Maccabee I think you want to get to, but there's a little bit of risk. Receiving game, Charlie Jones opted out. Payne Durham opted out. That likely leaves TJ Sheffield as the wide receiver 1. But from there, I have no idea what they do. You're looking at a team that basically rotates all their ancillary receivers. So you have Mershawn Rice. He had about a 50% route rate in the last game. Deion Burks, about 30%. Tyrone Tracy's been benched entirely almost, like 10% of routes. How much does he play? You also have Brock Thompson returning from injury for the bowl game. He hasn't played since like week 2, and he was projected to be a starter ahead of the season. So how much do they take a look at Brock Thompson? Not to mention the team total is really low here. And they have like Aiden O'Connell was a walk-on. Like going behind him, I don't know how good this backup quarterback is, but I don't have a lot of trust in him. So you're talking about an offense without your top 2 pass catchers, with a walk-on quarterback who is your starter leaving. That means Austin Burton now starts. This team could just suck today. So it's also hard to say what they do on offense. You lose your OC. Do they decide to run more? I think Maccabee's the best play in the whole team, but I'm trying to limit this to 1 Purdue player per lineup.
It's really bad. I wanted to ask you that. Like, is there a chance that they run some like option and or I mean, I don't know anything about Austin Burton at all. You mentioned Maccabee, he can catch the ball. This could be a weird scheme for Purdue, and that always freaks me out because they run a high octane offense that's not going to be able without O'Connell.
Plus, didn't they just get Hudson Card? Like, they're not even testing out Burton.
Yeah, no, they don't. He's not the guy in the future for them. So
yeah, so this seems like a get in, get out type game for Purdue.
Yeah, we did get some news. Shout out to Michael Klein in chat. Josh Williams is not in Orlando. He's not going to play for LSU today.
Little more interest in the other backs.
Yeah, consolidates it, but I still don't think it personally lends itself to one back taking full control of that backfield.
Yeah, probably like a 60-40 split in favor of Noah Cain based on recent work.
Yeah. All right, couple questions, and then we'll get to this last game. Let's see. We got Jaden Daniels with Rice or Ford or Pratt with Vele.
The first side.
Yeah, I would agree. It would be Daniels and Ford. Pratt or Spears?
Spears? Must be a super flex question.
It's got to be a super flex, obviously, but
probably Pratt. I mean, I know that's really close. I guess I'll say Spears. I do prefer Spears over Pratt.
So do I, but there's probably some ways to work. Pratt or Rising for FanDuel cash?
Pratt.
I would agree. All right. We're going to get to this last game, but I want to help some people. We've got one more. I mean, we got a ton of deals for you. Again, the link in the description of these videos, I say it every time. There's a lot of stuff in there. You're going to look at it, and some of it you're going to say, I'm not interested in. But there's going to be at least 1 or 2 or 3 things that you say, wow, I'm glad I went down there. Whether it's getting free months, whether it's free trials. I see people every time in chat. This happened to me yesterday in the NFL show saying, man, I really want to sign up and try these tools. I've been meaning to do it. And they don't even realize you can do that with free trials in the links in the description. And another way to do that, how about for 2 months? I wouldn't call it a free trial, but you can get 2 months of Stokastic Plus Platinum and $1,000 risk-free bet if you register over at BetMGM Sportsbook and make your first wager with the link in the description. So if you are in a state like me, I'm in New York, that has legal betting, and you have not signed up at BetMGM, and you like the tools, or you just say, I want to earn 2 free months of Stokastic Plus and see this picture. I don't know what our graphics department did with Mr. Lindquist here. Very, very disturbing, but that's the world we live in. You can do that courtesy of BetMGM. There's a nice picture of my co-host here, and there's Greg. I don't think I'm on these, thank God. But 2 free months. Speak of the devil, there I am. 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum, risk-free bet of up to $1,000. The link is below. It takes 2 minutes, and you are in for 2 whole months. That's a couple $100 value. That's that simple. So take advantage today. Okay, here we go. Marks or Kane?
Marks.
Would you risk fading Caleb Williams in small field single entry, or is that just burning money?
If you're running one lineup, sure. If you're running multiple, no.
Yeah, I agree. And for an aggressive single entry, I have no problem with that. Watts or Wyatt? I would go Wyatt. Yeah, Wyatt. All right. The Rose Bowl. Penn State, Utah, 53.5 point total. 1 point spread. I get right to it. I get people a little sneak peek over on the Odd Chopper channel. I like Penn State in the game. I really think they're going to win. Let's talk about them first. Sean Clifford is Sean Clifford. We kind of know what we're going to get. Maybe we'll see some of the backup here. He's got a multitude of guys in that backfield. He's got some dudes on the outside, not Parker Washington, but Tinsley's here, some of the others. Talk to me about Clifford and where he falls, middle of the pack, upper or lower tier today.
Yeah, I don't think he's playable. And I think this is maybe a little bit of a hot take, but he doesn't really run 177 yards on the ground this year. They use him as a game manager. He's only averaging 212 yards per game. And this is something Penn State's done all year. They're super, super sensitive to game script. If Clifford is winning this game and Penn State's up by a score or 2, they're not throwing the ball. If they're down by multiple scores, Clifford likely had something to do with that, and Drew Aller's coming in the game. So there's so many paths to failure with Clifford and very few paths to a ceiling. I just X'd him out of the player pool entirely. You could play him, but I think he's probably the riskiest play on the whole slate.
Regardless of if it's him or Ehlers, there's going to be some guys on the outside. You know, the transfer in Mitchell Tinsley, some of these other guys. I already mentioned Washington not here. Is there a wide receiver or 2 that piques your interest for Penn State today? Because Utah, as good as they are in some areas, they're not exactly a juggernaut defensively.
No, and Clark Phillips opted out of the game. He's kind of the lone player propping up that secondary, and he's gone. So I think Tinsley is the guy you look at first. Just Parker Washington out of the picture, vacating 611 yards. Tinsley should be locked into a target share. Keandre Lambert-Smith is also back to his full route share now that Washington's gone, but he's 800 cheaper than Tinsley. I'd rather just find that money and get up to the stud. From there, it's really hard. This team uses 12 personnel on a lot of their snaps. That split between Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, they're both around 60% of the snaps and routes. But they also use Tyler Warren, who fluctuates between 20 to 30%, which takes a wide receiver 3 off the field most of the time. When they do use one, it's Harrison Wallace, but I don't think he plays enough to look at. So I'm kind of laser focused here on Tinsley and Keandre Lambert-Smith when targeting a Penn State receiver.
The backfield, certainly we know that Penn State's going to be, I've said this to you before, they're going to be really good next year. I'm a big fan of what they've got. Singleton is a large piece of that. Him and Allen right now, are they forming a 1-2 punch? Does one of them consolidate more? How do you play this backfield?
It's exactly 50-50. Nothing separates them except efficiency, where Singleton's been better than Allen, but the coaching staff does not care. It's 50-50 right down the middle. And
does that make them both playable then?
I think they're both playable as contrarian options. Pretty good amount of running back plays in this slate, but the upside here is massive. I mean, in the last game they played, Allen had 21 carries, Singleton had 17. This team will literally run the ball 40 times if they have a lead. Not a major lead, like 7-point lead. Interestingly, like they've been very willing to just take the ball out of Clifford's hands. And they're actually favored right now. This has swung all the way to Penn State being a -1 favored in some spots. I think that makes a lot of sense considering what Utah's missing, but it's a little bit risky. The game prior, I mean, so we talked about the 21-17 carry game, 11 carries and 9 carries the week prior. So there is still some risk here.
Any cheapies for Penn State, or is it really sticking to the, one of these running backs? Tinsley on the outside, that's about it.
Yeah, it's just that for me.
Couple questions before we get to the last team in the Utes. Favorite $4,200 or under wide receiver? Let's see.
Brian Thomas.
Oh, yeah, that's right. LSU. McCray or Thomas?
Thomas.
Bigger ceiling, Thomas or Rice?
Thomas.
Penn State will be great next year. Top defense, yeah. I think they're going to be great next year. I really do.
They're going to be really good.
Really, really good. They got that tackle back. They have
a really good recruiting class.
Yeah, they're going to be good. Quarterback play, we'll see. But we'll talk about that in future Betting You episodes. Let's talk about Cam Rising. $7,500. He's a gamer. Answers the challenge. He's not a zero, far from it. In mobility, he can move a little bit. Where does he rank amongst the 8 quarterbacks today?
I think he's right there with Pratt, 3 and 4. Don't really have a strong preference between them. Price, not very different. Rising's really mobile, 409 yards on the ground this year, missed a game as well. Averages 245 thereabouts as a passer, 30.5 attempts. So he's just a little more active in the pass game than Pratt. No fault of Pratt's, just Utah will throw the ball a little bit more. And I think that's largely because they've lacked a run game this year, which doesn't project to be any different against Penn State, who's going to be without Joey Porter Jr. So anything you're worried about through the air with Rising, Porter's absence kind of eases that concern a little bit here. I think he's completely fine, stackable. A little bit harder to do that today without Kincaid. Lost Keithy early in the year, so down their top 2 tight ends. That means Thomas Yasmin should come in and play a lot. He's been really efficient just on a hyper small sample. So that's a bit tricky to evaluate. Does that hyper efficiency continue now that he's in a full route share and people can dedicate more coverage to him with Kincaid off the field? Does that change things? But Yasmin is a really good play. Vele is tricky. He only played 20%, participated in 20% of the routes in the conference championship. I didn't see him get injured, but I think he was banged up. He'd pretty consistently been the wide receiver 1 before that. But even the game before, Vele has only seen 1 target in each of the last 2 games. He's really risky, and he's really expensive, and I would rather play a USC stud or an LSU stud over him. Money Parks, Jalen Dixon, Thomas Enos, Makai Cope round out the receiving room here. They all rotate on and off the field. I have the most interest in Parks compared to routes and targets. I think he makes the most sense and is the best price-adjusted option. But I'll rank these number 1, Yasmin, number 2, Parks, number 3, Vele, just from a price-adjusted standpoint among the pass catchers.
Yeah, Vele is certainly priced a little more premium, and I'm over, again, on No House Advantage. 52.5 receiving yards prop. It's not that much higher than some of these other guys, Parks included over there. Cam Rising sitting at 242.5 for passing yards. I get that. And, a few dozen rushing yards as well. When you go to Rising, do you have any interest in him naked, or are you going to say, I want either this tight end or Parks or a combination of a couple Utah pass catchers?
I think you can play him naked. He's a very good runner. I have him stacked for the most part, but also having that rotation also makes him a little easier to run naked, in my opinion.
Did you know that I'm sure you did, that Chiba Hut has nachos?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I'm still getting up to speed that that's a real thing. Because we never heard of that. But let's talk about this backfield. You mentioned Rising and you mentioned that the tight end room is a little lost. Where are we at in the Utah backfield? Are they at full strength, or is it a committee-based approach, or is there a guy or two that we really need to look at?
I'm expecting a 50-50 committee between Micah Bernard and Jaquindon Jackson. Bernard handling all the pass game work, Jackson handling most of the early down, but that being pretty close to 50-50. So overall, like a 60-40 split with Bernard as the lead back, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. I mean, you mentioned several times, I feel like, as we broke down these games, that running back seems to be one of the deeper positions, even on a 4-game slate. Is that kind of how you feel? Because it seems like some of these secondary options or these committee-based teams, there are multiple pivots at their type of, position or salary range, I should say. Is that the kind of the case for a game like this where you've got Singleton and Allen and these Utah backs?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
All right, let's see what's going on in chat. We've got a couple minutes left, and then we will bounce on out of here. I do want to say real quick, because I can't even keep it straight with how much we've got going on. We've got some shows. No House Advantage Monday Night Football coming up. Of course, at 5 p.m. Eastern, the NBA Deeper Dive, NBA Live Before Lock. Of course, a little NFL Showdown action. You already did a Showdown show this morning with Lofty, breaking it down. Look at that content schedule, and that's just for Stokastic. If you like betting, go to OddsShopper YouTube and check out all the videos that we've got over there, breaking down college basketball, college football, NBA, NFL, these bowl games, everything in between. And as I say, always take advantage of those promos. The links are in the description. A great opportunity to do just that. And for the new year, if you want to hit that like button, we got a lot of people in here, and it's always appreciated sticking with us for a new year in 2023. Please support, subscribe, and be part of the team here. Let's get to these questions. Favorite spend-up option at running back?
Spears.
It's got to be Spears. I really can't push back that. We talked about that. Best flex 3,900 or under?
Kyron Lacey.
Is there a guy, I always like to ask you this, is there anyone at the flat min today that you could look at?
Terrell Bynum.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned him in terms of some of the personnel losses in the earlier games. That's interesting. Deuce Watts, Ducking, or Yasmin?
Yasmin.
Man, so you really think that the small sample size, but he has been hyper efficient, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and his efficiency can decline. He's going to be on the field like 100% of the routes.
They have no other options. Parks or Ford?
Ford.
$4,900 wide receiver FanDuel players. There's someone over there in terms of the cheapies that you think could be. I know it's a tough one.
Brock Thompson, the guy coming back for Purdue, is the stone min over there. They just didn't adjust his price.
We got
I don't know how much he plays, but he's going to play today.
Couple super chats in the world, which is very generous, never necessary, but always appreciate nonetheless. Loyal member of Team Stokastic, Vince, 1979 Gator, just says much love with a couple cool Gator emojis. Appreciate you, my man. Thanks for stopping in. And friend of the show, Dean, said Thomas over Mason Taylor, ? Purdue not great covering the tight end.
I think so.
Yeah, I would agree with that. $5,400 or less DK Flex.
What's the price?
$5,400 on DraftKings.
Ooh. What is Marks is right above that, correct?
Marks is 58, unfortunately. You're looking at like Pat Bryant or Ducking range.
Ducking is the number one there.
Yeah, it's not a great range, though, I'll be honest. Last minute on a flex, Yasmin or Reggie Love? I assume it's Yasmin for you.
Yasmin for me.
In terms of the spend up wide receivers, is it, in terms of raw points, Neighbors, Washington? I mean, is there anyone else at the very top? Wyatt?
Those are the two that project the highest. Neighbors 1, Washington is number 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to counter. And again, your projections, all the tools we have behind the glass, you take advantage of those deals, you're in for 2 months. You see all that stuff. Is Josh McCray a GPP or cash game play?
GPP.
Yeah. Austin Jones or Marks?
Jones.
Jones for me too. Yasmin and McCray or Ford and Thomas Jr.?
I'm going with Ford, the Ford side.
So, okay, Ford and Thomas Jr.
Yes.
Kane and Kyron Lacey or Sheffield and McCray for
Who
Illinois?
was the first name? Sorry.
The first pair was Kane and Kyron Lacey or Sheffield and McCray.
Sheffield side.
Jaquindon Jackson or Marks for a tournament?
Marks.
Marks, yeah. Wow. I've been you're on it. That was some serious rapid fire coming at you. Any final thoughts for the people on this 4-game slate?
I don't think so. You've got one unique late swap opportunity with that sort of island game, the Rose Bowl. So take advantage of that if you're down. Otherwise, I think we hit on everything. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter asking showdown questions, I can answer any of them there, though.
Absolutely. And that is at Matt_Gajewski. I'm at JazzRazDFS. And it's a perfect way to actually bounce on out of here and leave you guys with this. If you are looking for more access to us, if you like hanging out and you enjoy YouTube chat, you want more of that, you can always join us in Discord. We're hanging out. We're sweating games. It's a really fun community. There's live betting opportunities, and it's just always more fun when you're building DFS lineups, sweating DFS lineups, making bets, or sweating bets to do it together. And that's what we're all about here at Stokastic, and we really enjoy. We get more and more people in the ecosystem. The last question of the day, actually, 2 more, sir. Neighbors or Maccabee?
Maccabee.
And we're going to end it with Nathan's question, Shea Watt or Ducking?
Shea
Watt. Final words on this slate. We have done it. As always, great job, sir. Appreciate you hopping in with me to talk some college football, and Mike behind the glass, rooting for Penn State himself. It's going to be a good day for all of us. Friends, thanks for tuning in. I hope your new year is off to a great start. If not, there's plenty of time for us to turn it around. We're going to try to do just that. So I hope this has been a fun hour for you and just a fun time all around. Enjoy all the games today. For me, for Matt, for Mike behind the glass, good luck, enjoy, and of course, we'll be talking to you soon enough for the national championship.